Hey everyone, I'm excited to introduce a special guest today. It's actually a famous doctor, Dr. Jeff Gerber, who, I don't know if you probably have seen him. He actually hosts and created the Low Carb Denver. It's like a keto summit that's every year, and it's coming up in March. So I wanted to bring him on and talk about that because actually I'm going to be there. I'm actually going to be there answering questions, and also I'm going to be on his panel. I won't be one of the speakers for one of the seminars because he has so many speakers this year, but it's an awesome event. I've been wanting to go, but I'm going to go this year. I'm going to put the details down below, so you guys want to definitely check this out and come because that way I'll have a chance to meet you, and you can ask some questions. So welcome, Doc. How are you doing?
Great, Eric. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invite. And we're also excited that you're going to be joining us for Low Carb Denver 2020 in March.
Absolutely. I think, there's various summits and keto conventions around the planet. And I think we have two of the largest summits. And so it's really good to ally and get with you. And I'm curious, how did you get involved with the low carb ketogenic diet and then this deciding to do a summit? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, firstly about the conferences, and I know that you have one as well. And our conference started in 2016. We befriended Dr. Rod Taylor. He's an anesthetist, as they call them down in Melbourne, Australia. And we made friends because of our love of skiing. A lot of the Aussies and the Kiwis come out to Colorado to ski. So we skied up in Vail for a couple years, and Rod runs conferences, Low Carb Down Under, and also he was putting on anesthesia conferences. And he kept saying, let's have a conference in Colorado. And I said, what, are you crazy? So we started back in 2016 with our first conference up in Vail, and 150 people. And it basically grew to the point that we couldn't handle it in the mountains. And so we came down to Denver, and last year we had over 850 people, and
Wow.
It continues to grow. And so one thing I think is important for the audience to understand is that these conferences, the niches are slightly different, and perhaps who we're trying to attract. So we started out as a medical nutrition conference for healthcare professionals offering educational credit. And I can't help myself. I'm a physician, so I'm a little bit partial to healthcare professionals. So we offer CME, but then what we realized is this unique opportunity where we get a diverse audience. So not only healthcare professionals, but professionals from all walks of life, researchers, scientists, the general public. And so this is what our niche has become. And that was, the conferences were in 2016, Eric, but my interest in nutrition, I think that was the second part of your question. How did I get interested in that?
Yeah. Were you, did you start out being, traditional doc, and then you decided, wow. Well, I mean, I have no idea.
Right. So essentially that's correct how it started. So I've been doctoring now for 30 years, come from a family of doctors, also come from a family that was always struggling with their weight and looking at nutrition way back in the 70s. And actually, I have to give credit to my parents that, my mother, she did every latest, greatest diet that was out there, and really influenced myself over the years about an interest in nutrition, and then going into to medicine. And so family practice, as they call it, family medicine, was my area of focus back in medical school. And aside from my parents talking to us about nutrition, we just learned the standard nutritional advice back in medical school, and only had a couple hours of nutrition science, if they were. And, it was basically eat less, exercise more. and watch your calories. And being a vegetarian or a vegan was actually maybe a pretty good approach. And I have to tell you, back then, I mean, I considered the fact that we're omnivores and that I didn't understand this aspect that, why should we cut out, a real food, animal-based product? So, but with that, so standard training, and was doctoring for the first 10 years, and somewhat frustrated because we would just tell people to eat less and exercise more, and didn't seem to work, and we kind of gave up. And I'd say it was 20 years ago that patients started to come approach us with different nutritional attempts, and some of those attempts were low carb. And I even remember Suzanne Summers, one of the patients, had done Suzanne Summers' approach. And I've always been open-minded and trying to think outside the box. And I said, well, we can watch you, but you're going to eat all this food that's high in saturated fat, and I'm worried you're going to drop dead from a heart attack. But lo and behold, we monitored the patient. We saw actually they lost weight, they did great, they thrived, their metabolic markers improved. And personally, I lost 40 pounds with an experiment myself.
Wow.
And I started to read about the science, in particular the metabolic syndrome, the work of Dr. Jerry Reven. And that was just eye-opening to me, because the metabolic syndrome really just defined a root cause for metabolic disease and what causes obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. And so from that point forward, 20 years ago, I started introducing low carb keto nutrition to my patients, and it's just exploded ever since. And here we are today.
Well, that's very interesting, because there's a lot of people searching for keto-friendly MD, because they go there and they're not happy with what they're getting, and they try to find a doc that's open to at least listen to them, and then they're either made fun of or they're told that you're going to die of a heart attack. I'm just curious, when you work with people, I can't imagine putting people on this keto diet and then you're going to see massive changes with blood pressure, cholesterol, stuff like that. So you're probably working, just getting people off meds all day long, it seems like. I mean,
yeah,
because it's traditionally, you're just a doc that's not in the keto. They tend to manage the symptom, and they keep coming back, and they're still on the same medication, and they get more medication over time. Are you finding you're just getting less medication over time with these guys?
Yeah. So traditionally, you can say that the medical model is that of sick care, and you're just treating symptoms. That's what you said, and you're treating the symptoms with medication, and you're not addressing the root cause. And so, look, we love our healthcare professionals, and most of the healthcare professionals have spent a lot of years training, and they care about patients just as much as I do, but we didn't learn about prevention and how to properly prevent disease. And so what we have done is now we bridge the gap between modern medicine, which saves lives, very important, and the nutritional side of things, and we bring it together. And what we prevent disease, we treat disease, we reverse disease, and patients understand that. We are their personal health coaches, is how we say it. We like this aspect, and we teach them the science. They understand the science. And therefore they understand how to approach it, how to change their diet. They see the results, and we get patients off of medication, not completely, but the best example is for diabetics. We can get people completely off of insulin through the low carb approach and a keto approach, which, by the way, should be the default diet. Thankfully, the American Diabetes Association just in 2019 again came out with an endorsement that a low carb diet is an appropriate approach for diabetics. And there's always this argument. and it's challenged that we say that we can reverse diabetes, we can put it in remission, and this is indeed true because you can't do that with medication. You can only do it with diet.
Interesting. Yeah, it's when you obviously you have your summit. You're getting a lot of medical professionals coming to the summit. Are they? They're obviously open, but do you think, as a profession as a whole, that we know the hard thing to overcome is the cholesterol, the saturated fat, because that's probably a big thing. What do you feel is a common omission, or the thing that they just are not taught in? I think I already know what it is, but what are they not taught in medical school that is missing? Is it the link between high insulin and all these problems as a kind of a common thread to so many conditions? And I mean, it's just like there's something obviously taught incorrectly. Well, we know the saturated fats, but I'm just curious about like the insulin aspect to it.
Yeah, well, both important things to talk about, and and I say this all the time in medical school. It was physiology 101 that carbohydrates drive insulin.
Right.
It is that simple. In fact, I just saw a post from Gary Fettke from Tasmania, Australia, and the Dietetic Association there. He quoted a little line where they said that all the protein and fat in the diet is what drives diabetes. Okay. And I said, that goes against everything we learned in medical school, because carbohydrate is the single driving force for insulin, which ultimately drives diabetes. So it simply makes sense that if you want to address insulin resistance, hyperinsulinemia, that you focus on the carbohydrate content of food. And the problem is just everything got conflated, because the heart associations, again, they came in the 1950s with Ansel Keys, and again, wanting to help patients, people. It wasn't a conspiracy. There was a rise of heart disease after World War II. I mean, smoking had something to do with it as well. But so the idea there was that there was this connection between bad cholesterol, in air quotes, LDL cholesterol, and heart disease. And so then the focus just literally shifted to doing everything you can to lower LDL cholesterol in the diet. And the way to do that, you can lower LDL cholesterol by reducing saturated fat. And also, since fat was a caloric dense food, if you ate less fat or caloric dense food, you're reducing calories. So it was like a double whammy. You cut back on your saturated fat, you're going to supposedly reduce your risk of heart disease, and you're also going to lose weight. And what we know today is that nutritional advice, if you watch what's been going on for the past half century or more, is that obesity, diabetes, and heart disease are on the rise, the big three. And so the approach isn't working, right?
Right.
Yeah. So unfortunately, though, this conflated nutritional recommendations. And so another way to think about this, that nothing connected at all. And I love to tell people, what's the nutritional advice when you go to your doctor? Well, if you go to the cardiologist, he's going to tell you to reduce saturated fat in the diet. He's going to tell you to reduce the fat content. If you go to the nephrologist, he's going to tell you he's worried about your kidneys, so he's going to tell you to reduce the protein in the diet. And then if you go to the endocrinologist, he's going to tell you, well, I'm worried about diabetes, so we're going to reduce the carbohydrate in the diet. So you put that all together, and they're saying, well, if you never, ever eat, you're going to be super, super healthy. Right. Now that's not intermittent fasting or skipping meals. They're just, it doesn't make any sense. And so again, the common theme are what it is in the diet that drives insulin, that drives inflammation and drives metabolic disease. And so that changes the whole perspective, and it all gels together. And the root cause, again, being insulin, metabolic disease, eating a whole foods diet that's lower in carbohydrate and lower in processing, and a little more protein, a little more fat. That seems to make a lot of sense. And there's some common themes in there that we can possibly all agree to.
Yeah, it's definitely, that makes total sense. What about, like when testing insulin, it's just something that an average medical doctor doesn't test your fasting insulin levels or the HOMA-IR test. They don't look at that. They focus on blood sugars and A1C, and but I guess they just haven't dug deep enough into the insulin aspect. Yes.
So actually, my presentation coming up in March, I have a wonderful slide that looks at the timeline of the development of type 2 diabetes. And what you're pointing to there is that if you don't do the right measure, you don't know that there's a problem. Mm-hmm. And so the work of Dr. Joseph Kraft, he measured insulin through the 5-hour insulin assay, and we do a short version of that in our office where we measure a 2-hour insulin after a glucose challenge. But what Dr. Kraft showed is that patients have hyperinsulinemia, as he called it, or the earliest signs of diabetes and prediabetes, almost 20 years. Okay, 20 years.
Huge. That's huge.
Not 5 years, not 10 years, 20 years before you have the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, where it's like a blind pig can pick up a diabetic, and you really haven't helped the patient at that point. It's decades before that you need to take action and do the right measures. And so what we're trying to explain and for our healthcare professionals and to understand is that having an early level of suspicion for the metabolic syndrome, for these metabolic diseases, and doing the right measures can really help your patients.
For those of you new to this concept, we're talking about insulin. Insulin tends to go high way before your blood sugars go high, a long time. And so if you actually measure that when you see your doctor and you see if it's high, then you can actually have prediction and do something about it before you end up with the problem. Do you find that a lot of doctors don't even know about the HOMA-IR test?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
We could go on for hours about this, Eric, but I have two thoughts if I can remember. I have a perfect example of a patient just this week. And he has to lose probably 40 to 60 pounds. And when we see patients initially, we do an evaluation and we do metabolic markers. And lo and behold, he comes in and we measure his lipid profile. And the only tip-off on the lipid profile is he had a really low HDL, like in the 20s, and his triglycerides were high in the 200. LDL wasn't terrible. His fasting glucose was 95. His hemoglobin A1C was in the normal range of, 5.3, 5.4, right? Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, interesting. Well, you have a bit of weight to lose. The triglyceride ratios is a little tip-off that there might be some metabolic issues or some prediabetes or insulin resistance. I said, let's go ahead and do a glucose tolerance test. So we do the glucose tolerance test, and his his fasting glucose is okay, his 1 hour and his 2 hour were all normal. So a 2 hour glucose under 140 is fine. Okay, no worries. But I look back, I actually measured his fasting insulin was high at 20. His C-peptide was high at like 4, which is a pro-insulin molecule. And his 2 hour insulin was off the charts at 200. So a normal 2 hour insulin is under 40.
Wow.
And so that shows you right there that most healthcare professionals and the doctors, they say, okay, well, your triglyceride HDL ratio is off, but your hemoglobin A1C is fine. It's when you measure the insulin, sometimes fasting can give you a tip off, but also after the insulin challenge.
Wow. So you have them eat and then you measure so many hours later with insulin?
Right. So we give them 75 grams of glucose.
Okay.
They come in fasting. And so what we do is we do fasting 1 hour and 2 hour glucose, and at 2 hours we draw the insulin, and then that gives us the answer right there. Now the second point, and I did remember it, is I was discussing a patient with an endocrinologist the other day, and again, a great doctor, brilliant doctor, but does everything by the textbook, by the book, and is saying, why are you measuring insulin on these patients? We don't, the American Diabetes Association doesn't recommend it as a screen. And so, my response is, they're guidelines. And lucky for us, we have the freedom to do other things, other testings, other approaches to our patient. And this is why we do the insulin measurement. And most people do not know about the work of Dr. Kraft, and they need to, just as much as they need to know about the work of Dr. Raven and the metabolic syndrome.
Wow, fascinating. So I don't know if you have your browser up. I wanted to just let people know who's going to be speaking at your summit. But for those of you watching, you may want to consider coming. I'm going to put the link down below, but let's see, who do we have here? Dr. Stefan Feeney is coming. Let's see, who else? Dr. Sarah Hallberg, Dr. David Ludwig, who actually, isn't he the doc who did the sugar on the sugar? He's an endocrinologist?
Yeah, he's at actually Harvard.
Wow.
And he's worked on the NUSI study with Gary Taubes. And Dr. Ludwig is an excellent researcher and scientist. And, we don't want to scare people away with these researchers and scientists being there. One thing I do like to point out is that the speakers know that there's a diverse audience, and we pick people that are great at presenting information in a very simple way. So Dr. Ludwig, last year, he published a paper. It was from the NUSI research, for instance, and this study used doubly labeled water, and he was actually looking at energy balance. And it was not in a clinical setting. It was in the research setting, and it was just a short-term study, and basically showed that there was an energy benefit for the individuals that were on a low-carb diet, that he actually controlled for calories. And he showed that those patients actually lost more weight on the low-carb arm, seeming to defy the laws of thermodynamics.
Right.
But that's the thing. It doesn't defy the law of thermodynamics. If you add up the energy properly, it's all accounted for. But in the end, the patients lost weight. And this study, for instance, was contentious in the claims that it was making. But Dr. Ludwig does a great job of standing his ground, and also explaining the research. So, yeah.
That's great. Well, you got a whole list of, I'm just looking at these doctors. It's going to, let's see, the date of it's going to be March. Where's the date?
March 12th to 15.
Okay, good.
Yeah, right here in Denver, Colorado.
Denver, Colorado. Are you going to do it at the Gaylord again, or is it another?
Yeah, we keep moving it around every year because as the conference grows, we can't find, we can't establish ourselves. So this year it's going to be at the Sheraton downtown, which is just a couple blocks from the Capitol.
Oh, okay.
And then we even have our date set for 2021, which is at the Hyatt Regency, which is a couple blocks away.
Nice. Good that you're planning in advance.
Yeah, exactly.
With hotels, you have to.
Yeah. Now, one of the speakers I'm really excited is joining us is Dr. Arthur Agatston.
Ah.
Yeah, and so people might know his name from the South Beach diet. So.
That's right.
Yeah, that's the man himself.
That's him.
Now, what you have to understand, Dr. Agatston was and is a pioneer in cardiovascular prevention.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yes. And so long before he became interested in diet, but probably the reason he did become interested in diet was because he's a cardiologist. Mm-hmm. And when you get the calcium heart scans, that's where he's a pioneer.
Oh, wow.
The score is called AJ. AJ. A is for Agatston and J is for Janowicz.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So he's the man. And so, as you know, myself and my colleague Ivor Cummins, who we co-authored a book, Eat Rich, Live Long, mm-hmm. we're very much interested in cardiovascular disease prevention and finding the right tests. And we think the calcium score, the heart calcium score, is a wonderful and proper method of screening for heart disease, because you're actually looking at the disease process itself.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking at the disease process rather than using a blood marker, which is just loosely associated. And so Dr. Agatston, again, this is where he was a pioneer. And then he became interested in nutrition. And I actually heard Dr. Agatston speak here in Denver 10 years ago at the cardiology office down the road.
Wow.
Yeah. And I said, the South Beach diet. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Not bad. And Ivor actually connected us with Dr. Agatston. And of recent, it turns out Dr. Agatston has become and now understands and is an advocate of low carb and intermittent fasting.
Wow.
And he just came out with a new book, the Low Carb. It's the keto friendly South Beach diet.
Oh, that's funny. Wow.
It just came out. And so, as I say, the stars have aligned.
Yes.
And I want there to be, I want people from different walks of life, and I want there to be some common themes mm-hmm. That we want people to understand that there's science to back up the nutritional advice that we're discussing.
Mm-hmm. Hardcore.
And
yeah.
There's science to back it up. And so one of the common themes I like to say is the low carb Mediterranean diet. Whatever the Mediterranean diet is,
right.
It's so ill defined, but it has to be healthy because it's Mediterranean.
Yeah, exactly.
But at the end of the day, eating whole foods, unprocessed foods, a variety of animal and plant-based foods. So these are common themes. I think Dr. Agatston and our speakers all understand this. So it's every year, it's just a wonderful conference. We have some of the regulars and then some of the new people, again, like Agatston, William Yancey, another great researcher, Robert Lustig. He's just phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Belinda Linares, I believe, endocrinologist, talking about diabetes. Who else is on the list? Sean McKelvey is a pharmacist from Canada. Chris Kenobi is an ophthalmologist. Sarah Hune is a nephrologist.
Wow.
Yeah, Brian Lenskis is a primary care. Tro, I have to put Tro in there. There's Tro.
Yeah.
Kalajian is another primary care. Lucia Aronica does research in Stanford. We have Michaela Peterson coming out. And it's just going to be a great event.
Oh, yeah. That's going to be hot. So for those of you that don't know anything about what we're talking about, check out the link down below and definitely consider coming because it's going to be pretty exciting. There's just so much data. Question, are you going to have different rooms, or is it all going to be one room, just one speaker after another?
Right. No breakout rooms, just one room. We tried that in the past, and so people, they have this decision to make, and it's tough that way. So just
in the same room.
Yeah, it's a long conference because it runs from 7:30 till 6 p.m. On Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it cuts off a little bit early, and then we have a wonderful reception on Thursday night. And again, Eric, what's unique, and there's nothing like coming to a conference and meeting the speakers in person.
Mm-hmm.
And realizing that you can come up to them and introduce yourself and ask them anything you want. Sharing in the passion, other people attending, and there's nothing like it. And as we say, our goal in the conference is to educate and embrace people to take charge of their health. And it's not a boring medical conference. It's just there's passion.
Wow. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I think this is going to be an exciting conference, and I hope to see a lot of you that are watching there this March. All right. Well, thank you so much, Doc.
Thanks for having me, Eric. Looking forward to seeing you there.
Absolutely.